morning my nephew showed up with a moving truck before I'd even finished my coffee, I knew something was wrong. He stood in my driveway with two men I'd never seen before, pointing at my front door like he already owned the place. I stepped onto the porch in my robe and asked him one question. His face went the color of old chalk. "My name is Howard Price, 64 years old. Before you ask, no, not the same Howard in whatever story you've heard before. I was a forensic accountant for 31 years, the last 12 as a senior partner at an independent audit firm in Columbus, Ohio. I retired 2 years ago with a clean record, a good pension, and a house I'd paid off in full on Cloverfield Lane. It's a modest place, 3 bedrooms, a workshop in the back, a garden my late wife Judith started the year we moved in. She passed 4 years ago, breast cancer. After that I kept the garden going because it was the only thing that still felt like her. My nephew Brody, my sister's only son, had always been the charming kind. The kind who remembered your birthday and forgot to pay you back. I'd helped him through 2 business failures in his 30s, co-signed a loan I never saw repaid, and flown out to Phoenix when his first marriage collapsed because he called me crying at 2 in the morning. I did all of it because that's what family does. Or what I thought family did. He moved back to Columbus 18 months ago with his girlfriend, a woman named Cassidy who I'd met exactly twice before they showed up for Thanksgiving last year. She smiled with her whole face and said very little. I thought she was shy. I was wrong about that too. The visit started in February. Brody would stop by on Sunday afternoons with coffee from the good place downtown, the expensive one, and we'd sit in the living room and talk about nothing in particular. His business, which he described as a real estate consulting firm, though I never understood what exactly he consulted on. My health, which was fine. The garden. Judith. He started asking questions around March. Casual ones. "Uncle Howard, do you have a financial advisor? Have you updated your will lately? You know, with the market the way it is, some people are moving assets into trusts." I answered honestly, because I had no reason not to. I told him I had a will, that everything was in order, that the house was mine free and clear and would go to a small list of people and charities I'd already decided on. That's when the papers started appearing. He'd bring them tucked into a folder explained as routine. Tax documentation, a beneficiary update for an old account, an estate planning checklist his lawyer had drawn up, just to make sure everything's organized, Uncle Howard. I looked at the headers. I initialed where he pointed. I'm a forensic accountant. I've spent 3 decades catching other people's paperwork errors. I don't know how to explain signing documents for my nephew without reading them, except to say that trust has a way of switching off the part of your brain that's always suspicious. I trusted him. That's the whole explanation. The morning everything broke open was a Thursday in late September. I was in the workshop sanding the legs of a rocking chair I'd been rebuilding from a kit when I heard tires on gravel. I looked out the workshop window and saw Brody's truck, and behind it a second truck, a big white one with 2 men sitting in the cab. I came out to the driveway. Brody was on his phone. He looked up when he heard the screen door and smiled the smile I now understood was just a face he wore. "Hey, Uncle Howard. Listen, I should have called ahead. There's been a change of plans. The house, we need to start the transition this week." I looked at the truck. I looked at him. What transition? He pulled out a folder. "You signed the transfer documents in August. You agreed to move into the Maple Creek community. It's all here." He held out papers. I took them. I stood in my own driveway in the September morning and read words I had never agreed to. A signed property transfer, my signature at the bottom, notarized by someone named Ellen Voss, dated August 14th. I looked up at Brody. I didn't raise my voice. I've spent 31 years in rooms where the wrong tone ends a conversation before it starts. I asked him 3 words. "Who notarized this?" He blinked. "Ellen Voss. She's a licensed notary. Everything's legal." "Call her," I said. "Right now. I want to speak with her." Something crossed his face. Just for a second, then the smile came back. "That's not really necessary, Uncle Howard. If you'll just let the guys start." "Call her," I said again, "or I'm calling the Columbus Police Department." He didn't call her. He told the men to wait and pulled out his own phone and walked to the far end of the driveway. I went inside, locked the front door, and called my attorney. Her name is Patricia Cho. She's been my personal attorney since Judith's estate. methodical and entirely without sentimentality, which is exactly what I needed that morning. I read her the document over the phone. She was quiet for a moment. Howard, don't let anyone into that house. Don't sign anything else. I'm calling you back in 20 minutes. Brody knocked twice while I waited. I didn't answer. Through the front window I could see Cassidy had arrived in her own car. She was standing by the moving truck talking to the two men, gesturing toward the house. Patricia called back in 18 minutes. I've pulled the recorded deed. There's a quitclaim deed filed with Franklin County dated August 16th, 2 days after the alleged signing date. It transfers the property to a Brody Neil Sauer. That's Brody's legal name. I'd forgotten he'd changed his last name back to his father's after the divorce. The signature on the quitclaim, I said. Is it mine? It looks like yours. But Howard, I'm looking at the notarization block. Ellen Voss is a licensed notary. I'm going to contact her directly. What I need you to do right now is photograph everything. The original deed, your records, any documents Brody has brought you in the past 6 months. Start now. I spent the next 2 hours in my office going through every folder I kept. 31 years of professional habit means I keep records of everything. In a filing cabinet I'd maintained since 1993, I found the original purchase deed, the mortgage payoff confirmation, every property tax receipt for 22 years. I photographed all of it with my phone and emailed the files to Patricia. Outside, Brody knocked a third time, then a fourth. Then I heard Cassidy's voice, higher and sharper than usual. This is taking too long. I didn't open the door. Patricia called again late that afternoon. I spoke with Ellen Voss. She notarized a document for Brody on August 14th, but she says it was a healthcare proxy, not a property transfer. She showed me her log. The entry reads, Healthcare proxy for Howard Price, signed by Brody Neil Sauer as designated agent. So someone switched the document. That's what it looks like. The healthcare proxy and the quitclaim deed were probably prepared at the same time. She notarized one. They substituted the other. I sat at my kitchen table for a long time after that call. The garden was visible through the window, Judith's roses coming back for their last bloom before frost. I'd lived in this house for 22 years. Our daughter was born while we lived here. Judith died in the bedroom down the hall. And Brody, who I'd co-signed a loan for, who I'd flown to Phoenix for at 2 a.m, had tried to take it. I called my daughter next. Her name is Vivian. She lives in Portland with her husband and their 2 kids, my grandchildren, who call me Pop Pop and ask me to build things when they visit. She answered on the second ring, and I told her what had happened in plain terms because she deserved plain terms. There was a silence on the line that I recognized as her trying to stay calm for my benefit. Dad, she said finally, I'm booking a flight tonight. You don't need to do that. I know I don't need to. Book me a hotel near you. I'll figure out the rest. She arrived the next morning. She's 38, a contracts attorney herself, and she walked through my front door, hugged me once, and then sat down with Patricia's files spread across the kitchen table like she was preparing for trial. They planned this, she said after an hour of reading. This isn't Brody being desperate. Look at the timeline. He started visiting in February. The healthcare proxy was prepared in July, notarized in August. The quitclaim was prepared in parallel. They needed the notarization to look legitimate, so they used a real notary for the real document and swapped it. He's been doing this before, I said. She looked up. What do you mean? The business failures. The loan. I never got the full story on either one. I took his word for it. I paused. I'd like to know what actually happened. She nodded slowly. Then let's find out. Patricia recommended a private investigator, a man named Douglas Webb, former IRS Criminal Investigation Division, 23 years. He operated out of a building on East Broad that looked like a tax office from the outside, which I found appropriate. He asked me 3 questions at our first meeting, listened to the answers without writing anything down, and then told me he'd have a preliminary report in 5 days. It came in 4. Brody Neil Sauer, according to Douglas's report, had a financial history that read like a cautionary tale printed in small font. The first business failure, a property management company, had ended with 3 clients filing complaints with the Ohio Attorney General's office over missing security deposit funds. The complaints were settled quietly. The second failure, a short-term rental operation, had ended with a civil suit that was dismissed when Brody agreed to repay $38,000 over 2 years. He hadn't repaid it. The plaintiff had given up. "He's been doing a version of this for 8 years," Douglas told me when we met to review the report. "Small amounts, people who trusted him, resolutions that kept him out of criminal court. Your house would have been the biggest score by a significant margin." "What's it worth?" I asked. I knew the answer, but I wanted to hear it from someone else. "His estimate puts it at 640. Comparable sales in your neighborhood last spring ran 650 to 680. He had a cash buyer lined up, someone named Theo Brackett. Brackett's made 3 all-cash offers on Columbus properties in the last 14 months, all from estates or elderly sellers." I thought about that for a moment. He wasn't going to use the money to settle his debts, was he? Douglas shook his head. "Cassidy has a brother in Scottsdale. Brody's been in contact with a property management firm there. Looks like they were planning to relocate. $640,000. My house, Judas Garden, 22 years of our life together, and a one-way flight to Arizona." Patricia filed the civil suit to invalidate the quitclaim deed the following week. At the same time, she submitted the evidence package to the Franklin County Prosecutor's Office. Ellen Voss's sworn affidavit, Douglas's financial background report, the original deed documentation, and a forensic handwriting analysis from a certified examiner named Ruth Abernathy, who had been comparing signatures in Ohio courtrooms for 19 years. Ruth's conclusion, the signature on the quitclaim deed had a 94% probability of being a forgery. The pen pressure was inconsistent with my authenticated samples. The capital H in Howard was formed differently. The P in Price had no secondary loop that every verified signature showed without exception. I hadn't noticed. Brody had noticed I hadn't noticed, and he was right. That was the thing that stayed with me. While we waited for the civil case to proceed, Brody tried 3 separate approaches. The first was a phone call 2 days after the suit was filed. He was calm, almost professional. He said there'd been a misunderstanding, that the documents had been prepared by his attorney and something must have gotten mixed up, that he never intended to take the house, just to help manage it as Howard got older. I let him talk. I said nothing. When he finished, I said, "Brody, I've spent 31 years reading financial documents. I know what a substituted notarization looks like. So does the Franklin County Prosecutor's Office." I ended the call. The second approach was Cassidy calling Vivian's cell number, I don't know how she got it, and telling her that I had shown signs of confusion lately, that I'd been forgetting conversations, that Brody was only trying to protect me from my own poor judgment. Vivian told her that she was a contracts attorney, that she had reviewed every document, and that if Cassidy called again, she would add it to the record of the civil case. Cassidy did not call again. The third approach was a letter from a Columbus attorney I didn't recognize, claiming that Brody had grounds for a countersuit based on emotional distress and financial damage caused by my false accusations. Patricia called the attorney directly and outlined, briefly and specifically, the evidence we had. The letter was not followed up. The preliminary hearing was scheduled for a Tuesday morning in November. I wore the suit I'd worn to Judith's funeral. Not for sentiment, it was simply the best suit I owned, and I wanted to be taken seriously. Patricia met me on the courthouse steps. Inside, Brody sat at the defendant's table with his attorney, a man named Phil Garrett who had the kind of confidence that sometimes comes from competence and sometimes comes from never having faced a well-prepared opponent. He looked at me when I came in. I looked at him. Neither of us said anything. The judge was a woman named Susan Aldridge. She'd been on the Franklin County Common Pleas bench for 11 years. I'd researched her. Fair, methodical, no patience for procedural games. Phil Garrett led for the defense and painted a picture of a devoted nephew trying to assist an aging uncle who had grown forgetful and isolated since his wife's death. He used the word confused twice in the first 3 minutes. He mentioned my retirement, my age, the fact that I lived alone. His argument was that I had signed the transfer documents willingly and was now under the influence of an estranged daughter with her own financial interests, attempting to undo a legitimate estate planning decision. I noticed 2 things while he talked. He never made eye contact with me, and Cassidy, sitting in the gallery, was watching Brody rather than the judge, the way someone watches a performer they're not sure is going to remember the words. Patricia presented first. She kept it simple and worked in sequence. Ruth Abernathy's forensic analysis. The capital H, the missing secondary loop on the P94% probability of forgery. Ellen Voss's sworn statement. The date, the document, the log entry. Healthcare proxy. Not a quitclaim deed. The original purchase deed and 22 years of property tax records, all in my name, all uninterrupted, none reflecting any voluntary transfer of any kind. And then Douglas's background report. She presented the 8-year pattern, the security deposit complaints, the civil suit, the unpaid repayment plan, as evidence of a consistent, deliberate pattern of financial deception. Not a misunderstanding. A method. Brody's attorney objected to the background report as character evidence. Judge Aldridge overruled him. She'd been reading the forensic analysis while Patricia spoke, and her expression had grown progressively still, the way a person's face goes when they've made up their mind and are waiting for the presentation to finish. When Patricia sat down, Phil Garrett tried to recover. He called Brody to testify. Brody spoke clearly, maintained eye contact with the judge, and told a coherent story about my confusion, my forgetfulness, a conversation in July where I had explicitly asked him to help manage the property. He was good, I'll give him that. He practiced. Patricia's cross-examination was 7 questions. She asked about the date of that July conversation. He gave one. She produced my phone records for that date. I had been in Portland visiting Vivian and her family. I was 1,500 miles from Columbus. She asked whether he had disclosed to Ellen Voss that the document being notarized was a healthcare proxy and not a property transfer. He said yes. She read Ellen Voss's sworn statement aloud. It said the opposite. She asked how his signature appeared as the designated agent on a healthcare proxy that I had allegedly initiated if I had not been present when the proxy was created. He had no answer that made sense. He tried 2 of them. Judge Aldridge called her recess. When she came back, she was brief. The quitclaim deed was fraudulent. The evidence was clear. The property at 41114 Cloverfield Lane remained mine in full. She was referring the matter to the Franklin County prosecutor for criminal investigation of document fraud, and she strongly advised Brody's attorney to counsel his client on the severity of what that referral meant. Phil Garrett gathered his papers carefully, like a man trying not to look like he was in a hurry. I walked out of the courtroom and stood in the hallway for a moment, not because I needed to collect myself, but because the light through the tall windows was good, and I wanted to notice it. Vivian was behind me. She put her hand on my shoulder and didn't say anything, and that was exactly right. The criminal case moved on its own track. The Franklin County Prosecutor's Office opened an investigation 6 days after the civil hearing. Douglas continued his work on Brody's financial background, this time cooperating directly with investigators. What they found was worse than I'd expected, and I had expected a fair amount. The security deposit scheme had affected 11 people, not the 3 who had filed complaints. Most hadn't reported because they didn't think it would do any good, or they felt embarrassed, or they'd received small partial payments that kept them uncertain about whether to pursue it. The short-term rental operation had involved false reviews, double booking of properties he didn't own, and payments collected from guests for properties he'd listed without authorization. Brody had been running a low-level, long-running con against people who trusted him. Mostly older, mostly alone, mostly people who had something he could take without anyone else watching closely. Vivian came to me with the investigator's full report on a Sunday evening in December. We sat at the kitchen table the way we used to when she was in law school, and she'd come home for weekends, and we'd review her case briefs together, while Judith made something in the kitchen, and the house smelled like garlic in winter. She told me about the 11 people. She told me about the fake reviews. Did he plan to do this to me from the beginning? I asked. Or did I just become an opportunity? She thought about it honestly, which I appreciated. I think you were always in the back of his mind. And then when he needed something big enough to solve his problems, you became the plan. I thought about February, the coffee from the good place downtown. How glad I'd been to see him. I was easy, I said. You were trusting, she said. That's different. I wasn't sure she was right, but I let it stand. The sentencing hearing was on a Thursday in March. The courtroom was quieter than I'd expected. Brody came in with a different attorney. Phil Garrett had apparently declined to continue, a younger woman who handled his statement to the court with the careful precision of someone managing a limited hand. He read from a prepared statement. He was sorry. He had made choices driven by fear and financial pressure that he would regret for the rest of his life. He acknowledged that his uncle had done nothing but try to help him. He did not look at me. The judge, a different one for the criminal case, sentenced him to 14 months in a minimum security facility, followed by 3 years of supervised probation, mandatory financial counseling, and restitution to all verified victims of the property management scheme. The total restitution figure was $74,000 across 9 of the 11 people. The other 2 had declined to participate in the restitution process. Cassidy was not charged. There was insufficient direct evidence of her involvement in the document preparation, though the prosecutor's notes indicated she was aware of the scheme. She had left Columbus 2 weeks before the criminal hearing. I don't know where she went. A month after sentencing, a letter arrived, Brody's handwriting on the envelope. I recognized it from birthday cards over the years, the looping B, the compressed middle letters. I left it on the kitchen counter for 4 days. Then I took it outside to the back porch where Judas roses were starting their first shoots of the new season, thin red things pushing up through the mulch like they had no memory of winter. I opened the letter and read it. It was 2 pages. An apology, an explanation of the pressure he'd been under, an acknowledgement that none of that was my fault, a statement that he understood if I never responded. I read it twice. Then I folded it and put it in the pocket of my flannel shirt and went inside to make coffee. I don't know yet what I'll do with it. I'm not in a hurry to decide. The house is mine. The garden is coming back. Vivian is bringing the grandchildren in June, and I've already started building a sandbox for the backyard, cedar wood with a hinged lid to keep the rain out, the way Judith always said to do it. There are things you can't repair and things that only need time and attention. I spent 31 years learning to tell the difference. I'm still working on applying that to the things that aren't numbers on a page. But the house is mine. That much I know for certain, and some mornings, that's enough to start with. I keep coming back to February, the coffee from the good place downtown. How glad I was to see him standing at my door. That's the part people don't talk about when they tell stories like this one. They talk about the fraud, the documents, the courtroom. They don't talk about how easy it is to be the person who gets fooled, because being fooled doesn't start with a forged signature. It starts with being happy someone showed up. It starts with not wanting to be the kind of person who questions a nephew who brought you coffee on a Sunday afternoon. I spent 31 years catching other people's mistakes. I know what a substituted document looks like. I know what manufactured trust looks like. And still I initialed where he pointed because he was family and I loved him and I was lonely in a house that still smelled like someone who wasn't there anymore. What I've learned, really learned, not just understood as a professional fact, is that doing right by people doesn't protect you from the people who won't do right by you. Brody knew I was honest. He counted on it. My integrity wasn't a shield. For a while, it was a vulnerability. That's a hard thing to sit with. But here's what I also know. When the moving truck appeared in my driveway, I didn't panic. I didn't beg. I asked one question and I made one phone call. 31 years of reading documents, of building cases from evidence rather than assumption, of staying calm in rooms where other people were losing their composure. That didn't disappear when I retired. It was still there. I just had to use it for myself instead of a client. That's the thing about building a skill over a lifetime. You don't always know what you're preparing for. Vivian flew in the next morning. She sat at my kitchen table with Patricia's files and worked through them like she'd done nothing else her whole life. I watched her and I thought about the years I'd spent making sure she understood that careful, honest work was the only kind worth doing. She'd listened. She'd internalized it. And when I needed someone who could look at a stack of forged documents without flinching, she was already that person. That's not luck. That's what it looks like when the choices you make every day, across years, accumulate into something solid enough to hold you up when someone tries to knock you down. Brody made his choices too. Not in one moment of desperation, but over 8 years of small decisions that built into a pattern. That's how it works in both directions. The person who defrauds 11 people didn't start by defrauding 11 people, and the person who catches him didn't develop that ability the week before he needed. I'm not angry at Brody the way I expected to be. Mostly I'm sad and a little tired and genuinely uncertain what I'll do with the letter that's still sitting in my jacket pocket. But I'm in my house. The garden is coming back. Vivian is bringing the grandchildren in June. Some things you lose and don't get back. Some things you fight for and keep. Knowing the difference and having the patience and the steadiness and the plain moral clarity to act on it turns out to be everything. I'm still working on getting all three of those right, but I have time.